I see myself as well as somebody that I think would relate very much with most of the people that are involved with Synergy. That coming from our farm, I can remember as a small kid, I must have been 5 or 6, when the first landman came and knocked on my parents' door and said, you know, we'd like to drill a well on your land. And we had had none to that point. Some of our neighbors had had a few oil wells. We're just outside of Lloydminster, so it's very heavy oil. And it was one of the most exciting days in our house. Like, holy cow, this is something new and something special. And over the last 40 years, that relationship and multiple different companies, Husky, CNRL, Baytex, have engaged with our farm. Not always in agreement. Sometimes we want a road someplace and they want it somewhere else. Sometimes we'd come out and find a horse stuck in a Texas gate and you spend 5 hours getting it out and then a month and a half nursing it back to health. So there is certainly challenges, but my experience has been that the energy sector has been a very positive influence on our family, our farm, and the community that I'm a part of. So yeah, following university, I did move back to Saskatchewan. I started ranching myself and bought some heavy equipment and worked in the oil field. And then a few years after that, got elected to the legislature and served as an MLA representing citizens that often were trying to balance in their lives and in their community the interaction between the energy sector and agriculture and their families and farms. When I got appointed to Energy and Resources in Saskatchewan, we don't have a standalone regulator. The Minister of Energy is the chief regulator of the province. So at that point, had the opportunity and the responsibility of ensuring that projects that went forward in our province met the high environmental and safety standards that people of Saskatchewan expect. And it was my belief then, and it is now, that projects that can't be done responsibly and safely shouldn't go forward. And though no project or no company or no investment is perfect, we need to have a strong and robust regulatory system. We need to have clear and transparent rules, and we need to enforce them. And I think that Canada stands out amongst nations in our royalties, our regulatory system we have, and how it serves our citizens. Maybe a little overview about CAPP. I think most of you probably know who we are, but some of the details. CAPP, we represent the upstream oil and gas producers. So we don't represent the pipelines, we don't represent the refiners or petrochemical industry, just the upstream. And our membership produces about 90% of the oil and gas which is produced in Canada. Now, we represent them. Our vision is to enhance Canada's prosperity by enabling responsible growth of Canada's upstream oil and gas industry. And to do this, to achieve that goal, we do a lot of communicating. We communicate with governments, provincial and federal, and we do a lot of engagement with the people of Canada, both, and I break that really into 2 groups. Places in Canada in which we operate as an industry, where people know us very well, and those relationships are strong. We represent our industry and try and enable stronger relationships, more interaction, and more dialogue. And I know many of our companies do that work themselves, but we do it with a slightly different point of view collectively. And the second is engaging Canadians across this country, Canadians that don't know our industry well, that are aware of it, they understand the importance of it in the economy, but they don't know our values. They may or may not know somebody that works in the industry, and as CAPP, we work collectively on behalf of our members to tell the energy story broadly. And in my discussion today, the first I want to talk specifically about the importance and what we are doing to achieve our goals in the communities in which we operate. And the second part of my speech, I want to talk about, in fact, I want to solicit your help as we are reaching out to places in Canada that don't know us that well. People that are in this room, I think I'm going to ask if you would be part of that discussion. But start off with a bit of a snapshot. These are very challenging times for our industry. We have seen the price of energy decrease dramatically over the last year. It's gone from 90 to about $45 a barrel. Capital investment has dropped dramatically from about $80 billion last year to This year, we're expecting at about 45. At 45 billion, the oil and gas sector is still the largest private sector, the largest investor in the Canadian economy of any industry. We're larger than forestry, we're larger than the auto sector in Ontario, we're larger than the utility sector, even at 45 billion. But that reduction has some big challenges for our members, for the investments that are being made. We see about half the number of oil wells being drilled this year that were drilled last year, and those effects are cascading into about 36,000 Albertans that have lost their jobs because of the challenges we're facing. The communities in which we operate are also certainly seeing the reduction in investment. The citizens that aren't as busy, the small enterprises that aren't as busy, and that's probably going to be felt for a period of time still. But we can be masters of our own destiny. As a province, as an industry, we have been through this before. We don't control the price of oil. We never have. We have gone into low price environments before, and historically we have come out of them stronger. We have become more efficient. We have got our costs in line. We have stress enables technology. It enables entrepreneurs to find better ways to do things. And I can see that today, that companies are making very difficult decisions about how they get their costs in line. Innovation continues to develop to push the envelope and make Canada and Alberta at the forward edge of technology deployment so that we can be more efficient. We need to get market access, and when we are looking at the costs which we can control, we send all of our oil south to the US. All of our gas goes south to the US, where their market is mature. They have actually reduced their utilization of diesel fuel and gasoline. At the same time, places like India and China have billions of people that want higher standards of living. They want better diets. They want to be able to heat their homes, cook on a stove that isn't biomass or wood. And Canada has an ability to meet that need, but we have some real work to do to define our own destiny, getting pipelines in, getting LNG terminals that can service those markets. And to do that, we need to ensure that all of Canada understands the values of our industry, the importance of our industry, and how we operate. But I'm going to start off with talking about how we engage in the upstream with Canadians that know us well and communities that know us well, and really the communities in which you're from. With CAPP, we believe that it's not just CAPP needs to talk about what we do and tell people this is our industry and this is how we operate and what's important to us. That is part of it, but the much larger part is the listening part. And over the past several years, but even more so the past year, really leveraging upon how we can engage more with communities and what we can draw out of them: local knowledge, local concerns, specifics to geographic areas on water usage, on air, on smell, on noise, on dust. These are all things that are disproportionately concerning in one area or another, and where there is open dialogue, there's an ability to address them and to meet those head on. And with our team, we have really been active in trying to engage broadly across the province. We've met with synergy groups, mayors and councils, reeves and councils, economic development officers, economic coordination committees, chambers of commerce, service clubs, Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, and local community members as well. And this is something that is just ongoing, that we believe that we should be present and engaged in communities before we have to be. And in this past year, we have been in 70 communities just since the start of 2015. So in the final quarter, we're going to continue building relationships, meeting, learning about local issues, and really building trust and a capacity that where there are concerns, they can be shared open and honestly, and building relationships really before you need them. And this I can point to as having been very successful this year. And many of you will know that in the Fox Creek area, there was an induced seismicity event, a small earthquake caused by industrial development. And there has been hundreds. Thank you, ma'am. And that is something that our industry wants to be engaged with. We want to be engaged with communities. And when this incident happened, we were able to contact local municipal leadership, local community leaders, work directly with industry partners and with the AER, and ensure that we had an appropriate regulatory system to learn from what other jurisdictions in the US and in British Columbia have done when it comes to local seismicity. And ultimately, I think we had a successful outcome. More work to be done, but certainly following that event, we were able to move quickly and effectively. Now, I want to also talk a little bit, as I mentioned, about how we can engage Canadians that don't know our industry as well. And this here is where I'm going to ask for a little of your help at the end. Part of the listening is in community halls and building relationships and being available. Part of it, when we're talking about a broad Canadian perspective, we do polling, we do focus groups, we do small interactions with Canadians that don't know anything about us and try and understand what's important to you, what's your perception of our industry, and how can we do a better job of engaging you in this process. But maybe I'll start with the broad polling numbers. We use a polling firm called Ipsos Reid. They're a sophisticated national firm. We ask questions about our industry multiple different ways, but it usually boils down to the same raw numbers. That in Canada, about 42% of Canadians support the energy sector. And we ask it about energy developments, pipeline developments, the energy sector in general. And about 42% support, about 33% of Canadians are what we call disengaged. They don't have an opinion really one way or the other. It's not a priority or something they think about on a regular basis. And about 25% of Canadians are opposing our industry. Now, the supporters, 42, opponents, 25. Each of those are split from core support or opponents and conditional. Conditional supporters or conditional opponents are, I would support the oil and gas developments if this, and this, or I would oppose them if this, and this. And really, that's where I put myself. I'm not a core supporter of the energy sector, though I have a long history of interactions with it. I support the energy sector if it can be done safely, if it provides economic benefits in my community, if it meets a long list of things. And my experience has been a very positive one with the oil and gas industry. And ultimately, I am a supporter. But when I share the numbers at 42% support and 25% opposed, 42% is a larger majority than what the Liberals got last week. The Liberals won a huge majority in Parliament with about 40% of the vote. Now, at 42%, if it was just a vote, should the Kinder Morgan pipeline or Energy East go forward based on 42% vote for it and 25% opposed, we'd have any pipeline in the country. But that's not how energy projects or any project works. We have a robust national regulatory system, the National Energy Board. Canadians can engage in that process, and there's multiple ways to do that. And as an energy industry, I don't think we should be striving for a percentage, that this percentage is what matters. I think we have an obligation to reach out to all Canadians, that where are there legitimate questions, that we are providing good and honest and straightforward answers. And we have a great story to tell, but we need to do a good job of it. And to do this, I think if I was to be critical of how our industry has been in the past, we have traditionally done a lot of national ad campaigns. And we've put them on all sorts of TV channels and talked to a very broad spectrum of Canadians about fairly generic messages that have oil and gas pictures in the background, pump jacks or oil sands, people that know our industry talking passionately about it. And that is good, and I'm glad that we did that. But I think the next step that we need to take as an industry is learning from how we engage with local communities. We need to do some listening as well as just communicating. We have to learn from what those that oppose us have done to be successful in getting their messages out. I think we can learn from political parties, and certainly my background of understanding how to engage with communities and bring people along and ask people for help, I think is important. And third, asking those that support us to be active in this space, that as Canadians, we all have skin in this game. And some of us more than others, but all Canadians will see the benefits of the energy sector and the effects of it. So I think everybody has a right and a responsibility to be engaged. If I look at the challenge facing us, that 42% are support, 25 oppose, and I look at the news, I wouldn't believe that's the case. In fact, I would believe it's the other way around, if not more. That you see protests at Burnaby Mountain, you see news stories that are not flattering of our industry, and the reason is that 3 times as many people that oppose us are willing to be vocal than those that support us. People that support our industry normally sit on their hands, and I think that's true of most people. If you oppose anything, you're more likely to be vocal than those that support it on really any issue. On this one specifically, that those that oppose energy projects have almost made people intimidated to raise their voice in support. And I know I've been at hockey games or at coffee shops, and a conversation will start and somebody will say something that I don't believe is true about the energy sector. And in the past, I have kind of let it go. I don't want to be the one jerk at Tim Hortons that speaks up and starts a fight. I'm going to sit back, let them blow off some steam, fair enough. But we have got to a point where I think that's happened so much that those that oppose us have the microphone, and those that support it are letting somebody else define our destiny for us. And there's been a substantial amount of work about where the funding comes from to fund the opponents. I don't think that matters. I think the onus is on us. If we want to define Canada's destiny, and Canada has an opportunity to be a supplier of choice to a world that wants higher standards of living, India, China, Indonesia, Nepal, Canada can be that supplier of choice, but we won't be if we don't get engaged. So a couple things CAPP is doing on behalf of our industry is, one, like a political party during a campaign, you go and you door knock, you go door to door around your constituency, around your province, and you talk about issues and you engage people and you find out who supports you. And if you meet somebody and you're on their doorstep and it's long-term care is their passion, you write that down. And later on in the campaign, you send them an email that today we had an announcement about long-term care beds or treatment, or how we will put forward a platform for elderly issues to somebody that cares about that. That's something we need to do as an industry. We need to know who those 42% that support us are and ask them to be part of this engagement. We have to use technology better. On Facebook, putting out graphical information about our industry. I work with a bunch of engineers at CAPP, and they are very data driven. If we get people the information, they will agree with us. And I come from politics and from the social sciences. People like graphics. People aren't going to take 10 minutes to read a 2-page document about the science behind pipelines or greenhouse gas emissions. They may care about those things, but we need to engage them in a manner in which they are comfortable and convenient. And the other piece is, Canadians don't trust politicians to give them energy information. They don't trust energy executives to give them energy information. Canadians trust people they know. They trust their brother that works on a service rig. They trust their cousin that drives a vac truck. They trust somebody that they went to school with who's an engineer. And by finding out who supports us in Canada, 500,000 Canadians work in our industry, and asking them to be part of this conversation, to engage their social networks, that is going to be powerful. And that's part of the reason that I was so keen to engage this group. You know our industry well. Not all of you are going to be supporters of it. Some of you are going to be conditional supporters, as I am, but you still have knowledge and information, I think, that we can share with people that today don't know enough about us. And the last piece of what CAPP's doing is called the Raise Your Hand campaign. But the Raise Your Hand campaign, you may have seen on TV this year, and it is not just talking about our industry, but it does talk about our industry and our values. But at the end of it, it gives a clear ask to Canadians. If you support the way Canada produces oil and gas, please raise your hand and be part of the conversation. And not just identifying who our supporters are, but asking them to be active participants in this conversation. Because if we don't, we'll allow others to define our destiny for us. And I feel far better if those that know us best are part of that conversation. So I will conclude my remarks there, but I'm happy to take any questions. And my last pitch is, if you go to this website on your smartphone, you can sign up to become a Canadian Energy Citizen today. And we will send you an email every week, every 2 weeks. If there's something topical in the news that is likely to be talked about in the coffee shop, we'll send you a graphical piece that you can put on Facebook or share with friends and family, and give us an ability to hear from you as well. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thanks. I've lived in Alberta now for 12 years, but I'm an East Coaster from Cape Breton Island.
Yeah.
So when I think of my Facebook page and the way the oil and gas industry is viewed where I'm from, what I think would be really great information is when the oil truck comes and fills my mom's tank at her house, where does that oil come from?
Yeah.
Because I think that would be really important. Like when I chat with my mom, I'm like, well, there's oil in Alberta that can't get to you, but the oil at your house, where does it come from? And are you okay with the environmental and the humanitarian conditions in those countries? They're unaware of where it comes from. So maybe a graphic that depicts where all the oil in Canada in certain regions comes from would be impactful for those people that are just glad the truck came.
What you've identified is something that we're really trying to get out there, because 80% of the oil in Quebec and Eastern Canada is imported. We in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba are seeing between $5 and $25 up to as much as $40 discount on our oil. The government's not getting royalties on that. We're not being able to make investments. It's stunting our economy here. At the same time, people in Quebec and Eastern Canada are paying a $25 to $40 premium to bring oil in from Norway, the US, Angola, Azerbaijan, and Nigeria, I believe, are the 5 largest places that Eastern Canada imports oil from. And your point is dead on. I think that Canadian oil produced with Canadian values makes a lot more sense than Nigerian or Azerbaijani oil. Room for improvement, but yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for your presentation. For 25 or 30 years, we milk cows. And we obviously know where milk comes from. I think we've got a lot of people who don't even know where milk comes from. They think it comes from Safeway.
Totally.
I think there's people that actually believe that when they fill their car up, it comes from cyberspace. So there's an upside and a downside to everything we do. And we've had oil wells on our place since 1962. This dirty word called fracking. Well, we're still drinking water out of the well, and maybe I'm not the healthiest guy in the room, but I'm still here. So I'm sick and tired of the horrifics. I'm sick and tired of people who have their little agenda and they don't see the big picture. And the big picture is, if you don't like the equation that we have right now, how do you put something in there to change it? What provides those jobs for people to, create a salary and provide for their families and do the things we want? So everybody wants this thing called a wonderful standard of living. And I get that. What I don't get is, give me an alternative if you're going to shut somebody else down. And they don't come forward with that. They just think the government's going to, fill the gap. So I'm kind of, after the last couple of elections, and there's a lot of people in this room who say that's just an old fool. Well, I've got a bunch of grandkids and I've got a bunch of son-in-laws that work in the oil patch, and thank God they're doing that because they're not sitting on my table eating meals with me all the time.
Yeah. No, your point you make about people think milk comes from the grocery store. Growing up on a cattle ranch, I use that example at the CAPP board table, that people think meat comes from the grocery store. And I married a girl from Vancouver, and she had been a vegetarian and a animal rights activist, and she moved out to northern Saskatchewan and living on a cattle ranch, and she was like, I can't believe what I thought, how you would deal with your animals. That the perception I had in Vancouver and talking to folks that had their agenda was that you beat your animals and you starve them, and the livelihood of a rancher is the health of his cattle, and it's hard to connect those. And the energy issues, totally the same challenge of where does that fuel tank in Eastern Canada fuel come from? It comes from very hard-working people that put steel-toed boots on and go to work when it's 30 below to produce energy for everybody else. It's just like you get up and milk at 6 in the morning. That's where the milk comes from, hard work.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan, it's Diana Donheimer here. I took quite some time to review the information that was in the Raise Your Hand campaign. I sent several very detailed emails to CAPP in regards to how the Raise Your Hand campaign says it protects the health of all Canadians with respect to the oil and gas industry, that it protects surface and groundwater, and that natural gas is clean. CAPP refused to reply to those emails. There was one that was very small that didn't answer any of those questions. This has been going on for over 6 months now. I've also posted that to your Facebook page, which did not get any replies as well. So I'm looking for validation for the information that you've put in the Raise Your Hand campaign, because it's not supported by the science. There is actually no protections for public health. There is no protections for groundwater and surface water that you could provide to us. And you're constantly in media saying that natural gas is clean. And from what's happened around our home, I see very differently. I have thousands of records that demonstrate otherwise. And I'm a little concerned about the fact that you're saying you want to give a better, higher standard of life to people in Indonesia and China, when hydraulic fracturing around our home has actually ruined our standard of living. So I'm concerned about what happens to Canadians that are impacted by this industry, and what about their standard of living?
We do have a substantial amount of information on our website. As far as protecting groundwater and protecting water, my knowledge certainly of the Saskatchewan regulatory system is far better than British Columbia or Alberta, but I know that they all very much mirror each other. And as the regulator in Saskatchewan, I was confident we had the appropriate oversight in place in regards to, as I said earlier, no project in Saskatchewan should go forward if it can't be done safely and responsibly. And that principle is really a Canadian principle. And it's not just for oil and gas. No milk could be put on the shelves in our country if it wasn't safe. Canadians just have an expectation of safety. No car can come out of Ford's auto plant if it doesn't meet high safety standards. We're Canadians. We have the highest standards in the world, and we should. As an industry, we attract investment to our country because people value Canadian values, that we have good regulatory system, that they're clear and transparent, that everybody gets treated the same. There's no special deal for big companies or little companies. That is actually a competitive advantage for Canada, as opposed to an Azerbaijan or a Nigeria, where the rules are opaque, they're applied differently. Corruption is an issue, where in Canada, we produce with Canadian values, just like agricultural products, safety products, cars, trucks.
I'm asking you to validate the information that you put in the campaign. And so I will forward that email to you again.
Okay.
Because I am looking for data that demonstrates that you're protecting water. You're telling all of Canada that you're doing these things and you're unable to validate them to me. And when you say that you're open and honest and transparent and you're engaging community members, I haven't experienced that in any way, shape, or form from CAPP. And I'm very disappointed about the information that you're putting forward because it's not truthful and it cannot be validated, whether it's in Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario, or BC.
And I would say that CAPP is not the regulator, nor should we be. Canadians elect governments to be responsible. There's ministerial responsibility, and CAPP obviously understands many issues, but the regulator is responsible for applying the rules and regulations.
We're responsible for validating what's put in the national campaign.
Okay, thank you.
The fun and the worst job of being the MC is playing time cop. Tim, I think the questions, the presentation, you being present, for Synergy, we talk a lot about being present in the discussions. Having you here certainly is appreciated by everyone here. I know the other folks from industry in a very difficult time that you've been present, you continue to be present. We certainly appreciate that. We appreciate your involvement, and most certainly we appreciate your presentation this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.